Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. So one thing that I've been mentioning probably in the last year, probably even more, is my idea, I suppose, of doing another Commander EDH based series. Now, regular viewers of the channel will know that I've got a current ongoing series called Saturday Morning Nostalgia. That's obviously going to run its course. There's about 2 more series of those. So in the next series we're sort of we're dealing with the tail end of the Born of the Gods, so the tail end of the Theros block. And so that would take us sort of into Born of the Gods and then journey into Nyx, and then the core set for that year, and then the next series after that we're getting into the Tarkir block. So that is going to come to a natural conclusion because I'm obviously not going to bring it completely up to date, as it doesn't become nostalgic anymore. But what I wanted to do is have a series already running that would start up now and potentially fill that gap. And that obviously goes alongside the regular unboxings that I do and other one-off videos. So my plan with this, and something I'd mentioned on and off, and I know several of the regular viewers were keen for me to do, is this idea of commanderizing something, mainly a pre-constructed deck, but it could be something else as well. It could be just a cool card that gets pulled in a booster that I open. So as I mentioned in a previous unboxing that I did, I think it was last week, on the Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper precon from Cold Snap, that's the particular commander that I'm going to start with. Now, rather conveniently, that card was also featured in a precon commander product. The actual, I'm trying to think now whether it was the first or second wave of the product. Actually, it was the second wave. So that would have been, was it 2013? I think, if I've got, my memory serves me correctly. Anyway, it was one of the 3 colour commander decks. It was the so it was a black, red, green. So that would have made it the shard ones. So I think, yeah, the first commander product was Wedge. Second commander set of decks were the shards. Then we went to mono colours, then 2 colours, and then this most recent one, we then had, was it 4 colour? And then we had the themed ones, which were variety. One was 5 colour, there were some 2 colour ones. So there's plenty. My point is, there's plenty of stuff to pull upon, whichever way this series sort of evolves, because it's going to be probably heavily impacted, I say, more than a lot of my other videos, by comments as the series and set of series jogs on. So we're starting off with Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper. If you want to take a look at the deck in whole, I would say look at the Cold Snap unboxing. Have a look at the original Commander 2013 deck. I did cover it in one of the Saturday Morning Nostalgia episodes fairly recently, but if you go back into the my sort of video history, if you like, you will certainly find the original Commander deck unboxing for that back when it was originally released. So I thought what I'd do is just a quick well, it's not, probably, knowing me, it won't necessarily be quick, but an introductory video where I sort of lay out the overall game plan with this, and the sort of things that I probably won't be doing, and the sort of things that I probably will be doing. to some degree, this is not a ground up, well, it's not an either straight top down or bottom up deck building series. What a lot of it does is build on the sort of videos I've done before, particularly ones that look at the concept of having a toolbox to basically start out. However, because of the way this works and the way I've planned it out, there will be instances where we will be looking at alternative ways of putting decks together. But the important thing to remember is it's not going to be straight. You know, choose your commander, and then build top down from that commander, or have a cool card and then build around that card and then find a commander to top that off. That's not going to be going down that route. But as I go through this introduction, you'll sort of see where my mindset is on this whole thing. So, as I said, we're starting off with Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper, black, red, green. I just got a couple of other black, red, green commanders out here. You probably saw on one video I showed the Zara Irian EDH deck that was originally released on before all of the paper commander product on Magic the Gathering Online. And if you're interested in seeing that, then go and track that video down. It goes through the deck card by card, and just talks a little bit about how that came about, because not a lot of people realise there was actually an EDH deck on MTGO. In fact, there were two before there was ever a paper product. And then, of course, over here, albeit from Chronicles, because I've never attempted to track down the original Legends version of this. I imagine it's, you know, on the expensive side, was one of the original Elder Dragons that sort of started this all off. So let me just put those to one side as I explain a little bit more about where this might go. So we've got Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper. One other little side point here before we go on. The reason why I've got this magazine in the background is it's always interesting to know, I think, for a lot of people, like, where was ground zero? When did you first learn about, in this case, we're talking about Commander as it's called now. When did I first learn about EDH as a format? And it was actually through this magazine. This was a one-off magazine, which I've talked about before. It was published by Beckett. I think originally they were planning to do a series, you know, this was going to be a magazine, an ongoing concern for them. But as far as I know, and anybody out there that's come across the next one on from this, correct me if I'm wrong, but this was the only one that was ever released. Issue 1 came about in summer 2010. So Rise of the Eldrazi was imminent or had dropped. It was that sort of first full year that I was first in Canada. And yeah, so it highlights lots of different things. I'm not going to go through this in a massive amount of detail. I think the original video I did this, but just to draw your attention to really what started off. So in here there was a casual corner which was written by Abe Sargent and Laura Mills, and then Benny Smith did several different articles in here, one of which concerned EDH. And in here somewhere, and amongst all of this, there was a what was referred to in this article as a budget staples list. Yeah, that sort of got me interested. At the time I was thinking about things like toolkits, and I think I was thinking about doing a series built around a, was it red-black land destruction, resource removal, you know, like a hand disruption deck called No Hand No Land, which I'd picked up on. Yeah, so there was lots of sort of ideas bouncing around in my head even back then for video. I think I just started doing YouTube videos, and at that point I was really just opening random packs of stuff, and I don't think I'd got into any of the series at that point. But here we go, that's what I was looking for. So inexpensive EDH staples, which I'm assuming are no longer inexpensive, so like a lot of things. And some of these I tracked down. I mean, I remember buying some of the land stuff at the time in here, and as a consequence of reading this, I started reading both Benny Smith's and Abe Sargent's articles online, and discovered a series of articles that Benny Smith had done about EDH toolkits, and they're well worth tracking down. So remember, again, this was back before the Commander product had actually arrived, and I believe the first two sets of articles he did was there was one on, well, there was an original one on basically EDH, but then there was some stuff on toolkits, and I think the first one he did was on allied colours, so 2 colour decks. Back then the perceived wisdom was that you didn't attempt to build a monocolour EDH if you were sort of new to it. You either went for like 2 colour or 3 colour maybe. So there was an allied combination toolkit series, or sorry, article, a enemy colour one, and then a little bit later there was a 3 colour one, and not surprisingly this was one of the colours. It was based on shards, 3 colour shards, and it was released oddly enough around the time of the original Commander product, which was actually wedge shaped commanders. And so we're going to be touching a little bit on, you know, those sort of toolkits. The other person in there that I mentioned, Abe Sargent, has done a whole load of articles over the years, and there's some very interesting ones on budget Commander, where there's been a long-running series where he took the very first deck he built, he set himself up like a budget in paper of around 30 something bucks, and then tried to, every deck he made subsequently beyond that, and they were different commanders obviously, he tried to come in under that budget, and that's been running for quite a number of years now. It's a great way to just get exposure to maybe cards that you don't normally come across, and the decks are very, in terms of the mana base, they're very simple, you know, because they don't employ an awful lot of expensive mana fixers, and they're great articles to read if you get a chance. There's a whole load of other casual articles he writes, but yeah, Abe Sargent's articles on these sort of budget Commander builds, well worth checking out. So back to what this sort of video is. I just spent probably 13 minutes talking about everything else apart from this series. So maybe we'll go through some of the things again. It's not what it's not going to be about, or stuff we're not going to use here. It's maybe stuff I've experimented with before off camera, and then found that it didn't really have good results. So let's just go back to this deck, because this is what it's all about. So we've got this Cold Snap deck, and I went through this, like I said, last week. What I've done here is I've taken out and put to the front all of the cards in terms of just the one of. So there's one of each of the cards that are in this deck, excluding obviously the mana base, although that may inspire us in other ways. So here's our Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper. When I actually start doing the series in anger, the reason why I'm not starting fully going into it this week is I'm waiting for some cards to arrive because I want to be some of the earlier episodes I want to be actually in paper, and then going forward after about the second or third series, I'm going to switch over to just doing it totally digitally, just because it keeps the cost down quite considerably. But even doing that, I'm going to keep a track of the paper costs, because the idea is to keep this within a relatively reasonable budget. So we've got one-offs of all of these. So one approach that you can do, and I've certainly considered it and done it on paper, and it's a good one to do on paper anyway, just an exercise, is to take the deck actually as a whole. So this is just for when we do the series. I've got the one-offs at the front. Take the deck as a whole, work out the proportions of all the cards, and scale the deck up to a 100 card deck. Now when you do that, it's not going to be obviously a singleton deck at that point, but the idea is just to scale everything up. So you've now got an original deck which was 60, and on paper you've scaled it up to an equivalent deck in 100. Now I accept that when you do that, there's going to be multiples that don't work out as whole numbers. So you can't play 2.5 cards or copies of a particular card. But what you can do is scale up and scale down similar cards. So one you might choose to round down, one you might choose to round up, to get to that same total number of 100. And so you end up with effectively 100 card equivalent of your 60 card deck. Then you go through and you, if this is a word, you singletonize, if that is even a word, the deck. So what you then do is substitute all the multiple copies with either functional reprints or strictly worse or strictly better versions of that card. That then gives you a singleton version of the deck at the 100 card count. And there's one final step to obviously make it relevant, which is to then go through and swap out any cards which just don't make sense in a multiplayer format. So there might be some spot removal in there that does make sense, or some spot mana pump that does make sense. But generally you're going to get cards in there that don't perform well in multiplayer. So the idea then is to take something out and put in something that makes more sense in a multiplayer environment. For instance, I know the evoke cards are very popular in EDH, where they've got a creature with an effect stapled on it, and you can play the card and you can choose to either have the creature there and the effect, or just the effect. So that I'm thinking of that sort of things, or things like scalable cards, where you might have a mana burn card, a burn spell, like say lightning bolt. And say you remove a 3 toughness creature or do 3 damage to a player, is to replace it with an X spell. Or maybe you do want that single red mana spot removal in there. But again, it's this ideal of how do you scale up for multiplayer formats? How do you make it so you just don't run out of options in a multiplayer format? So that's that idea, the scaling up method I call it. And there's a number of steps to that. You can mess around with the order in which you do it, but really what you do is you end up with an EDH version of the deck. But that's not what we're going to be doing. Another thing that you can do is if as you saw in previous episodes, like I did a series called the Box Store Commander Challenge, where I was looking through different products that you might see out there, like sealed product and stuff that you buy from box stores, where you have no control over you do have control where it's sealed product, but the idea was to look at from one end of the scale to the other, going through and find out which products tended to be more Commander, more DDH friendly than other products, and looked at things like probability of pulling stuff, and what I think we opened a fat pack from say particular Magic the Gathering core set, which had a high number of rares that were EDH playable. So if you've got one of those sort of kits, you got a lot of stuff to draw down from. And what went in there, if you remember, was a lot of the second wave of EDH products. Funnily enough, the deck that contained Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper as an alternate commander. That deck also contained other commanders in it. In fact, Prosh and Shattergang. Now, what you could do, this would be a very quick and dirty way of doing it, is basically you just go through the deck, decide all of the things in the deck that are still relevant if you're closely aligning the deck to Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper abilities, and it's not necessarily, it's not going to be aligned to the original commander, which was the Prosh commander. Keep all of those, and then remove anything that at this point, you can always put them back in. These are what the up, down, upside down cards are. Remove those, including possibly some utility lands which don't make sense, and then insert into this monstrosity your singletons from that particular Cold Snap deck, the Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper Cold Snap deck. And then, you know, again, you're gonna be short on cards, so at that point you start to add in staples or track down cards that work well in the deck. So what you're doing is you're using an on-color commander product as your toolkit, but we're not going to be doing that. What we're doing really is an offshoot of a couple of series I did. We've got the Box Store Commander Challenge, where since we've done the series, I've been adding to that toolkit. In terms of stuff that's been going in there, then we've had another commander product I stuck in there, the green-black deck from 1 year. I also checked out the Benny Smith articles and started to put in some of his toolkits in there. So obviously I deviated from the original Box Store Challenge theme, but it did give me some interesting stuff to work with. So let me just show you this. So back when I first read the articles, I was only aware of the two colour articles. So what he'd done is he'd got this series of components. So there was a thing called the Universal Toolkit, which contains these sort of cards in it. Okay, you can see very universal cards that, and these would have been, you know, budget at the time. Some of these cards have gone up, some are still budget cards. Okay, so there we have those. And then let me just give you an example, say the green-white one. And of course what happened was some of these cards I did actually already have from the Box Store Commander Challenge. In fact, with I think the green-white one, I had well over half of the cards here, and certainly with the Universal one, that was another one where there was quite a lot of stuff in there. So it's just a question of filling out these. So this is all stuff now what he did was that he didn't just make it so it was green-white staples. It was made so that the particular colour combination did lend itself well to a particular legendary creature, in this case Talismir Wolfblood. So his approach that he suggested was you basically take the Universal Toolkit plus whatever colour combination you want to play out with. You've already got your legendaries, so you don't have to worry about selecting a commander. And you've got cards that are, you know, work well in that colour, but also might work well with the commander depending on the balance. And the toolkits did sort of move backwards and forwards a little bit in terms of, you know, were they more did they work just well in the colours, or did they work well specifically with the particular commander? And then what you do is you just fill it in with stuff you want to play, either stuff you just, in your binder. Also, you've got to put some basic lands in there to bring it up to, like 38, 39 lands, however many you play, because there were some lands in the Universal kit. And then you just move on from there, just tweaking it. And it's a sort of real nice old school, it sort of combines the best of both worlds. So you've got this sort of budget staples toolkits, which are conducive to a particular commander, but then you're throwing in cards that you just want to play from your binder. So that approach sort of really appealed to me. And recently, when I was thinking about this series, I've discovered that a year or so later, maybe less, he did a series on 3 colours. And lo and behold, we've got Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper. So this is the toolkit, and I'm going to go in more detail when we get onto the series proper, but you can see it's got both the on color stuff and the universal. And remember, the universal component in here was tweaked subsequently from the original one, again to deal with price increases, but also, not surprisingly, some of these cards have gone up in the meantime. For instance, there's a Nim Deathmantle in here, which is now, I don't know, $4 to $6, I think. So that ultimately I may end up swapping out if I'm trying to sort of maintain some sort of budget constraints on here. So what we're going to be doing over the course of the series is starting off with our Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper toolkit, and then into that bringing our cards from the Cold Snap deck, Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper Cold Snap deck, but only the stuff which suits our particular theme for the deck, and I'm going to explain that in the first video of the series. How we're going to focus in more on the sort of Graveborn token aspect of this, particularly the whole sack outlet thing. So yeah, so that's our general approach. So it's this sort of, it is a toolkit approach, but it still gives us that wiggle room that you get where you can say, yeah, there's a card I'd really like to play in here that I think might work well. In terms of beyond this first series, other things we might look at, you saw me pull a Mundai Ambush Leader, which I'm keen to do as a second series, again along similar lines. So here we're looking to have a red-white toolkit. The other thing that's going to happen is we're going to be constructing our own toolkits. I'm just using the Benny Smith stuff as a starting point because it's just easiest to go off with that. Very helpful if it's basically just trying to get up and running quickly. But I think for the red-white one, it'd be really cool for us to build our own toolkit, with whatever it is, 28 cards, and then fill it in. And with this one, we will be doing something that's probably allied tribal, exploring the whole rally design space. And then what I want to do is look at bringing into the mix other pre-con products which didn't exist in paper, and pulling in maybe unusual stuff from there. I have a deck which I'm going to do a video on, which was a red-white deck, which only ever existed on Magic the Gathering Online. It was a theme deck, so we're going to be looking at Mirage as well, the Mirage block. So there's loads of interesting stuff just in the pipeline coming up for us to deal with and to look at. Another thing I'm going to be doing as part of this series, but I don't think it's going to go beyond this, we're going to look at the whole issue of aggregate decks. So we're going to take a look at EDH Rec. I've already got a deck list together for a budget aggregate deck. So when I say that, what I mean is on EDH Rec, it obviously looks at what is being played, and when you start looking at budget decks on there, what you often find is you sort of end up with this mix of very broad, synergistic, good stuff, cheap but good. And so what I've done is I've got a list for that. There's a couple of things I'm going to swap out because they don't make any sense in there, but I'll show you the finished deck again when all the cards arrive. So for this first sort of probably 2 series of this, for certainly the Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper and the Mundai Ambush Leader, we're going to be hopefully sticking strictly in paper. Beyond that, then it's definitely going to have to go digital, but again, I'm going to do prices and stuff like that to help people. And I think that's all I want to really talk about. But just again, I know there were several people that were interested in, pulling in cards from the series, not No Hand, No Land, Box Store Commander Challenge. And that will be happening. So we have stuff waiting in the wings already. So, looking at this already, I can see there was an Endless Cockroaches in that from a deck builder, from a EDH product, which definitely belongs in this sack deck. There's good old Eldrazi Monument, which was in the green-black commander deck. There's various commanders that I would like to just not commanders. There's legendaries in that were pulled as a result of opening stuff that just I'd love to play around with. And then there's Miseric called Death Priest. I showed you some of the on color stuff. Zarya Iron's a very interesting draw card in those colors, and if you can get that out, it's just tap and draw a card with 3 colors. So yeah, some interesting stuff to play around with. There's other things I pulled, like in terms of the aggregate EDH rec budget deck, then something like this sort of scalable sack, where you've got a creature with a spell stapled on it that also involves it being sacrificed. That sort of thing, interesting to play around with. So there's a ton of design space to mess about with over this coming Sek'Kuar Deathkeeper series, and that's about all I want to really talk about for the moment on this. So thanks very much for watching once again, and bye for now, and look forward to seeing you in the first episode of this series.